Okay, so the Forest Service is one of those federal agencies that received a lot of funding in this bipartisan infrastructure law. And I'm going to focus on the fish passage and aquatic organism passage type projects, and I'll mention a little bit more in there as well. But it's an exciting time. The first big program is one that we have had in the past at varying ranges of funding, but we received $250 million for the Legacy Roads and Trails project, and that is focused on roads and trails. The legacy, oftentimes roads that are not performing well or they're old, and so that means it's a great opportunity for replacing culverts or decommissioning roads. And we also have this collaborative aquatic landscape restoration program, CALR. We had a little bit of dam decommissioning, and then we also received the IRA funding, which I'll touch on as well. So legacy roads and trails, yeah, $250 million over 5 years. And there's some new language in this version from Congress and talk about increasing climate resilience, which you see, because the work that we all do to get rid of small pipes and put in larger culverts and bridges, obviously is a benefit to communities and water quality for climate resilience. So anyway, that's just something that you have to mention. We're talking about fish passage. We're doing climate resilience work for the communities. And it also mentions source water protection. But in our internal guidance, we were able to make sure that we gave points for projects that benefited a nip-hack species. So brook trout is the nip-hack species for the brook trout benefit. So that's one of the things that we were able to do internally. And as I mentioned, it's for communities, roads, and trail relocation. So a little bit of the details here. The first year at FY22, $40 million is allocated, 120 projects across the country. And within the Eastern Brook Trout Range, there were 15 primarily culvert projects that will open 37 miles of habitat for Eastern Brook Trout, and it was a total of about $1.2 million. So not the big expensive ones, a lot of the smaller projects. And then in FY23, it's approximately about 100 projects, either design or construction and similar. I didn't crunch all those numbers, but it's probably between 10 and 20 brook trout projects. So, you've seen, over the life of the project, it's going to be 50, 75, 80 projects just for brook trout. And this is just this one program. The CLLR, it's a mouthful, that was a new program from Congress that was focused on drinking water for miles of fish passage restored. It's an $80 million project over 5 years. And it's on federal and other non-forest service lands. So that's sort of like the project funding that can be used outside of the watershed. Lots of different project types for the AOP work. And in the first year for FY22, there's about $25 million that went out the door. None of those projects were Eastern Brook Trout. And I think that was a function of a lot of brook trout projects have been funded through Legacy Roads and Trails. There's lots of other work to nip with. We don't have a lot of these bigger culvert projects on the National Forest System, or even just adjacent. A lot of those are smaller roads. They're not the big $1 million culverts. And I would argue also that because we've been focusing on it with our many, many partners, including the states, obviously EBTJV and other groups, that there aren't tons of bigger brook trout culvert projects left on the National Forest System. There are problems. There's work to be done, but they're smaller projects. And so what I thought you might mention, Shannon, in the last one is that there were some really nice bundled projects funded under the fish passage program. 8 or 10 culvert projects bundled as one. And then we went through this round of funding again in FY23, $29 million. And again, there were no brook trout projects. More focus on warm water in our southern region. And so, the CLR program wasn't a big hit for brook trout. The other big program, the other program which is not big is the dam decommissioning. We received about $10 million. It was pretty small. They're probably the funding amounts, but that's going to fund about, 5 or 10 high hazard dams. Again, this part of the bill is not going to be focused on brook trout, but there are lots of other federal programs, including Fish and Wildlife Service, NOAA projects that are happening on national parks. But one of the big projects that was funded last year was from mostly the Inflation Reduction Act, and that's a keystone agreement with Trout Unlimited. So the Forest Service has obligated $40 million over last year to our Trout Unlimited partnership, which is a whole new world for the team partnership with Forest Service. So that's great. This is over 5 years, and it's focused on all the great watershed restoration work, including culverts and small dams, abandoned mylan restoration work that TU has been doing with the Forest Service and many other partners on the national forests. And so the list that we have right now, which is being adjusted, is about 170 projects across the country. We're talking thousands of miles of impact benefit when we're done, thousands of acres. And for the 9 national forests that we talked a little bit about earlier today in the eastern region and the southern region, there's about 30 brook trout projects planned. So, the TU partnership is growing. There's other big partners as well, but they're mostly out west, like Wild Turkey Federation. Well, they're mostly, not in brook trout habitat, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. That may have some impact, but again, probably not on brook trout. So the other thing I'll mention about the Inflation Reduction Act is that is for our priority watersheds. And we have about $90 million going to our regions for that. And if there's a brook trout project that's within this priority watershed, that's the perfect place for it to be funded over the next 3 years through the Inflation Reduction Act. So I'll leave it there, just a whirlwind quick flyover of some of the big funding projects for brook trout. And maybe there's time for questions too. Sure. All right.
Shannon had a comment online. She said, "We love bundling."
Excellent. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Nat.